So AEW, we have some interesting AEW news regarding Andrade El Idolo. Now, because of course Andrade, former WWE superstar Andrade El Idolo, as he's now going, has officially signed with AEW. But there's some interesting information as to how this deal came together, certain aspects of Andrade's contract with AEW, negotiations that he had with Impact Wrestling, Ring of Honor, and other promotions as well, and certainly some very, very interesting negotiating tactics, shall we call it, from Andrade during these discussions with Tony Khan and All Elite Wrestling. So this is being exclusively reported by Wrestling Inc. So let's take that in mind. Andrade met with Tony Khan in Florida the week he was released from his WWE contract in March. Now, obviously, this is quite a while ago at this point, so you would ask, why did it take so long for Andrade to eventually sign with All Elite Wrestling? Well, Tony Khan was motivated, reportedly, to sign Andrade, given that he did not have a 90-day non-compete clause, as is usually the case with most WWE superstars when they're released from their contracts. However, a deal wasn't made. Now, reportedly, again, this is according to Wrestling Inc., reportedly, negotiations stalled with Andrade coming into AEW because of Andrade's demands and what he wanted in his contract, which included wanting creative control and veto power on losing. Now, reportedly, there was a compromise that was made on that, and he will have a limited amount of creative control on his finishes. Andrade also wanted to work for other companies outside of WWE. Reportedly, Andrade was also in talks with Impact. They were willing to guarantee part of his creative control demands, but they were too far apart on the number of dates he would be paid per date and not a guaranteed downside, which is how a lot of recent Impact deals have been structured. They were pretty close to a one-off appearance at one point, but obviously that had not and is not happening as of right now. Ring of Honor were reportedly also interested in Andrade. Andrade's close friend Rush is the Ring of Honor World Champion, and his Ring of Honor contract expires in January. After a slowdown in getting the deal done, Andrade signed with AEW last week. They had been working on the language in the deal for several days. Now, this is a fascinating, absolutely fascinating report by Wrestling Inc. If this is accurate, and again it's an if, but if this is accurate, and let's suggest that it is, then that is crazy, really, frankly. Don't get me wrong, Andrade is premier talent. He wasn't used, I think it's fair to say, to the best of his ability in WWE. There were glimpses, there were flashes, primarily in NXT. Obviously, the guy has a lot of talent. He had a lot of talent before he went to WWE, where he worked in New Japan, former IWGP Intercontinental Champion, former NXT Champion, former United States Champion. The guy has that it factor, and he's only 31 years of age. He's not even really in his prime yet. So Andrade is prime real estate for a company like AEW to pick up. Now, is he going to necessarily really push the needle? Only time will tell on that matter. But he probably wasn't used to it with the best of his abilities. That is probably fair to say in WWE, and it's a great signing for AEW. But I look at this report and I say, creative control and veto power on losing? Who does this guy think he is? Hulk Hogan in the late 1990s? This is crazy. I mean, don't get me wrong, I understand the negotiating process, and I understand you should always try and get the best deal that you can. There's been lots of discussion recently, hasn't there, about Braun Strowman and his WWE contract, and that he made a huge mistake by getting a big contract, and he made a massive mistake by actually earning some money and trying getting himself the best deal possible and knowing his worth. I'm not going to criticize Andrade for trying to get a good deal, but the idea that, well, wherever I go, because I'm very important, I'll need creative control and veto power. Whenever has creative control benefited the pro wrestling industry? We're yet to see it. We hear all of these horror stories of Hulk Hogan in WCW and WWE after that, for that matter, as well, using his creative control clause. Now, whether or not he actually ever used it is up for debate. You get people like Eric Bischoff that say, nope, never used it before. You get people like Vince Russo saying that he did. You get other people, other wrestlers saying that he did, other wrestlers saying that he didn't. Who knows? Only Hulk Hogan, realistically, and the people he interacted with during that time will actually know that fact. But no disrespect to Andrade. And look, Hulk Hogan's name certainly isn't what it used to be, and maybe not being compared to Hulk Hogan isn't actually a bad thing nowadays. But creative control and a veto power of, I don't want to lose to that guy, or I'm not going to lose this match. If I'm an AEW fan, and if I'm an AEW, if I'm Tony Khan, or I'm a senior executive, I'm executive vice president in that company, or I'm a senior figure in the locker room like a Chris Jericho or whoever, I hear these stories of these negotiations. And I wonder what kind of person is coming into the locker room here? What kind of ego? What kind of personality? Because you have to have some form of a chip on your shoulder, or maybe an inflated self-worth, to think that you have the power or the pull to demand creative control on your character. And on top of that, the veto to saying, I'm not going to lose that match. Now, frankly, you could argue that anyone in the pro wrestling business has the veto to say, I'm not going to do it, because you can't force someone to do something. You know, if anyone can do that. Chris Jericho can be told by Tony Khan, I want you to put over, I don't know, Joey Janela in the middle of the ring. Chris Jericho can say, I'm not going to do it, and he won't do it. So maybe the idea of the veto of, well, I don't have to do that, or I'm not going to do that, maybe you could just say, really, why are you going to have that put in writing? So I'm not necessarily concerned that much about that, the veto thing, even though it just seems overly, like I said, over the top and unnecessary. But frankly, everyone has that veto power. Not everyone, if you're not going to do something, you're not going to do something. It's the creative control line that does concern me there, because as I mentioned, I understand negotiations and I understand getting the best deal possible, but this is a guy that he has to realize, yes, he wasn't used to the best extent in WWE, and yes, he has a point to prove, but if I'm Andrade, I would be looking at my post-WWE career like this, saying, look, I know that I have buzz because I'm just coming off WWE television. I have a chip on my shoulder because I wasn't used to the best effect that I should have been on WWE television. I requested my release because I know I can do better. I'm capable of doing better, and I want to do better, but realistically, I should be going into wherever I'm going to sign next with an open mind and open eyes, open ears, and willing to work hard and get the opportunities that I wasn't given previously in WWE, but also work for them and earn them. The idea of, well, I'm going to have creative control, exactly what I want my character to do, and I want this and I want that. He's also got to realize the environment he's going into. Pro wrestling throughout the years, and this has been the concern for lots of people when it comes to AEW, is that you look at places like WCW, arguably one of the biggest reasons WCW failed in the late 1990s, in addition to the politics of Warner Media and Turner and all that kind of stuff. One of the biggest issues with WCW is that there wasn't a guide, there wasn't a figure of, that's where the buck stops, it's their decision, their call is final, whether it's Vince McMahon in WWE or whatever. Now, we've heard that actually Tony Khan's decision is final in AEW. What Tony Khan says goes, and if you don't agree with it, tough luck, because he's the boss. And once you start getting people to come in and having creative control, that starts to muddy the water a little bit, and you have clashes. And look, I don't even know if there's anyone in the professional wrestling landscape right now that would be worth giving that clause to for AEW to sign. You know, we're talking like, it sounds ridiculous, but we're talking like your John Cena's, your Roman Reigns's. They're the guys that if AEW wanted to sign and they said, we'll give you anything, but even then you would say, it's a slippery slope even for a talent like that. No disrespect, Andrade isn't on that level. He just isn't. Now, will he be in the future? Who knows? Only time will tell. Nobody knows what the future contains. But as of right now, is Andrade of the level of a Roman Reigns or a John Cena or a Brock Lesnar or any of these massive, massive stars that could realistically push the needle? Andrade's not at that level. And the creative control thing, I just found staggering. I found absolutely staggering. And again, frankly, we don't know how true the report is. We don't know how accurate it is. It did mention that a compromise was reached. So I don't know what that compromise is. Reportedly, it's that he'll have an element of creative control in his character, but I think a lot of people in AEW do as well. Chris Jericho says that he has an element of creative control. I think quite a few talents, especially the higher-up talents in that company, they do have an element of creative control on their character in the same way that it's a collaborative approach, but at the end of the day, the final decision is made by Tony Khan. That's how it should work. That's how frankly, the company needs to work. So that language of that deal of creative control, veto power if I don't want to lose, again, that seems very, very political and very unnecessary. And frankly, without wanting to sound like The Rock, know your role. Does Andrade realistically have that kind of negotiating power right now? I'm surprised that AEW didn't hear those requests and say, you for real, we want to bring you in. We think you're talented. And we know that you didn't get maybe the opportunity that you maybe deserved or warranted in WWE, but creative control and veto power, that's not happening. And reportedly a compromise was reached, time will tell, but it's interesting. I know a lot of people have been critical about the pairing of Andrade with Vicky Guerrero. People have been saying that that's not the right managerial appointment for him. Obviously, I understand the Guerrero connection, the Mexican heritage there, but realistically, is Vicky Guerrero in 2021 the right manager for Andrade? Well, certainly he thinks so if he's got an element of creative control there. So maybe his ideas aren't the best ideas. It's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. And again, I don't want to diminish or take away from the signing of Andrade to AEW because it's a big signing and it can be a major player for them. And he can be a major player for them. As I mentioned, he's only 31. So there is plenty more he can do in AEW, and it's a great signing. I don't think AEW is going to be the only place he competes. I think he is going to compete in AAA. I think he is going to compete in New Japan. I think he'll be exclusive to AEW in the United States. But time will tell with this one. It's fascinating. That is a fascinating report, and it's very interesting. It's very interesting. Now, we got some comments. Andrade did comment on his AEW debut on Friday. He said, quote, "The new Andrade El Idolo, new goals, new opportunities to achieve more success. Thank you so much for the great introduction, Vicky Guerrero. Thanks for the wonderful welcome, All Elite Wrestling and AEW on TNT." So that is certainly interesting. Another comment was from All Elite Wrestling Executive Vice President Cody Rhodes, who was asked, "How do you feel about Andrade coming to AEW? I'm pretty hyped myself." Cody responded with, quote, "Well-dressed man, big signing by Tony. Andrade is a stud, and I'm excited to see him in AEW." Now, I think, obviously, a lot of people are excited to see Andrade in AEW. I myself am. Who his first feud is going to be against, that's interesting. The debut, I did a live stream at the time, and I was kind of reacting to it the first time, and I was excited. I think everyone was, but in a bit of being able to have a bit of hindsight now and look back on it, was it maybe the debut that he would have wanted or the debut he expected? I don't think so. There's lots I would have changed about that. I don't know. The crowd obviously didn't hear Vicky Guerrero, so they didn't even hear her say Andrade El Idolo, so there was no pop from the crowd. There was no music. There was no graphic. So Andrade just kind of walks out. There's a bit of a reaction there, but it was what it was. And then he gets to the ring, cuts the promo, and that was kind of it. It did feel slightly underwhelming. And then you have these reports coming out about the negotiations. There's a lot at play here. There's a lot at play, and obviously we're going to find out more soon. But it's interesting to see how this one is playing out. Ray Fenix, we have some update when it comes to Ray Fenix about a possible update to his injury. Now, as was noted on May 21st, the Wrestling Observer newsletter pointed out that Ray Fenix is dealing with an unknown injury and was going to miss the Double or Nothing pay-per-view. Of course, he did. He actually provided commentary on the Double or Nothing pay-per-view. Now, according to Cassidy Haynes of Bodyslam.net, Fenix is currently dealing with a groin injury. It was initially stated that he would be out of action for 6 to 8 weeks. According to that timeline, he could return roughly a month from now. Now, Ray Fenix's last match was on the April 26th edition of AEW Dark, where he defeated Chuck Taylor. Obviously, if we have any more updates when it comes to Ray Fenix, we will let you know and discuss it here on the channel. Hopefully, the guy returns soon. It's the second Double or Nothing event he's missed. Of course, he missed last year, and he missed this year as well, which is disappointing. Ray Fenix, for me, is, I mentioned before that WWE for years at this point, has been looking for a replacement for Rey Mysterio. One of them was Andrade. But you look at the replacements that they've tried. Alberto Del Rio, I mentioned Andrade, Sin Cara, Humberto Carrillo, Angel Garza, Kalisto, the list goes on and on. For me, the closest guy to being the next Rey Mysterio is Ray Fenix. I am blown away by the stuff he is able to do. I know he teams up with his brother, Pentagon, a lot on Dynamite, but primarily he cut his teeth as a singles wrestler in the same vein that his brother did. For me, Ray Fenix's money is as a singles wrestler. I've said it several times and people have questioned it, and my opinion hasn't changed on it. Ray Fenix can be an AEW World Champion at some point in his career. He is still incredibly young. I think he's in his early 20s. It's crazy. And the thing that he's able to do, if they can find a way to, I guess, get him a mouthpiece, get him a manager. I think he speaks pretty good English, though, in fairness. If the sky's the limit. The sky's absolutely the limit for Ray Fenix. Now, I mentioned he's had a couple of injuries over the course of the last year or so, whether it's groin injuries or whatever. So let's hope that he's returned soon. They're saying about 6 to 8 weeks, so roughly about a month or so. And let's hope he can really start to get into something substantial. I've enjoyed the tag team wrestling he's done with his brother. I enjoyed Death Triangle with Pac, but it kind of just feels like sometimes the Lucha Brothers are just kind of there, doesn't it? And they haven't really done much that's really substantial, really substantial. Of course, they were slated to be part of Chris Jericho's Inner Circle. The Inner Circle was meant to look completely different. It wasn't meant to be Santana and Ortiz. It was meant to be the Lucha Brothers, and Anthony Ogogo was meant to be part of the Inner Circle with Chris Jericho. So imagine that. It could have been so different, and that would have meant that the Lucha Brothers would have been featured much more heavily into some Dynamite storylines. And even pretty much ever since then, they've kind of found, just as I mentioned, just there. And I want more. I want more. Now, obviously, there are reports of maybe 6-man tag team championships, trios championships coming to AEW in the future. That could open the door for Death Triangle, Pac, Pentagon, and Rey Fenix to possibly challenge for those titles. Just prior to the pandemic, they were laying out guys as Death Triangle, as a six-man tag team. The reason why is I think they were going to win those trios championships. So maybe they get back to that point sooner rather than later, but here's hoping Rey Fenix returns soon. We have an update when it comes to Double or Nothing. The latest update on Double or Nothing is that it was a very successful event for AEW. AEW and its pay-per-view distributors sold an estimated 115,000 buys on all platforms globally. This is according to Brandon Thurston of WrestleNomics. The May 30th pay-per-view drew about $6 million total for AEW and its pay-per-view distributors. With the current statistics from WrestleNomics, Double or Nothing appears to be AEW's second highest selling pay-per-view in the company's short history. As of recording right now, AEW Revolution is AEW's highest selling pay-per-view in its history. The March 7 pay-per-view grossed just under $7 million, and had around 1,000 buys. As noted a few days ago on the Wrestling Observer radio show, Double or Nothing sold about 4,700 tickets and generated approximately $300,000. Dave Meltzer also reported before that it would be the second highest AEW pay-per-view. So, I mean, what a year! Considering we're still in the pandemic right now. You've got Revolution in March, and now Double or Nothing as AEW's highest selling pay-per-view or best pay-per-view of all time. Double or Nothing is AEW's second best highest selling pay-per-view in its history. That's fantastic news. Now, arguably, what's surprising there is Double or Nothing is really a tentpole event for AEW, and Revolution is maybe a lesser event, certainly has less history when it comes to AEW, and it did so well. Why did it do so well earlier this year? I don't know. It's a good question. You look at that card, I would argue the Double or Nothing card was better than Revolution. I would argue the event itself was better than AEW Revolution. Obviously, it had a crowd there as well. There was so much, frankly, that was better about Double or Nothing than Revolution. Maybe because coming out of the pandemic, maybe because there was some buzz about having a bit of a larger crowd for Revolution, maybe it was because of the mystery Hall of Fame signing, whether it was Sting's first cinematic match back as well, the Exploding Death match, barbed wire main event between Moxley and Omega. I don't know. It's an interesting question. It's a fascinating discussion point that we'll have to discuss more in depth at a later point, because that is certainly very interesting, isn't it? Now, speaking of the AEW World Championship, it was announced prior to AEW Dynamite that the AEW World Championship match pitting Jungle Boy and Kenny Omega would be moved to the Saturday episode of Dynamite on June 26. This episode of Dynamite will be taped, unlike the show that it was originally scheduled on. On the latest edition of the Wrestling Observer radio show, Dave Meltzer said he was told by AEW President Tony Khan that Khan wanted the June 26 Dynamite to be a spectacular show. That's a quote, spectacular show. So once again there, if you ever get any discussions about where does Dave Meltzer get his information from, when Dave Meltzer reports on anything when it comes to AEW, if he's got some insider information, you know exactly where it's coming from. I've said this time and time again. Dave Meltzer has openly stated on several occasions Tony Khan grew up reading the Wrestling Observer newsletter. If Dave Meltzer reports on something about AEW, it's because he's spoken to Tony Khan, who has told him he can report it. So anything you get from Dave Meltzer about AEW is factually accurate, unless Tony Khan has told him to put something out there that's not true. Apart from that, Dave Meltzer's scoops when it comes to AEW are always going to be spot on because of his relationship. That's just how it is. Now, AEW will tape the Saturday episode live and have one more Dynamite in Jacksonville before going back to touring. The next two Dynamite episodes are set to be taped shows. The belief is that these episodes would not be taped in front of fans. The move was done, of course, to avoid and prevent spoilers. It's not known yet if episodes of Dark and Dark Elevation were taped in front of fans. So, to be honest, AEW is in a very difficult situation right now, frankly. That situation is that they're preempted for June. They're preempted for a month, which is incredibly unfortunate. As I mentioned, they had this momentum coming out of Revolution, heading into Double or Nothing. Huge momentum because of a great show, big attendance, second highest selling pay-per-view of all time, all that kind of stuff. Just great information and great work by AEW. And then any momentum they had just kind of evaporates like that because of this preemption, because of the NBA and the playoffs, the move to Friday, Saturday, not live, taped, all this kind of stuff. This is why they're moving to TBS next year. I know that Tony Khan initially was like, well, we're not going to move and all this kind of stuff. But realistically, he probably saw the writing on the wall here. If we stay on TNT, we have the NBA every single year. We also have the NHL coming to TNT as well. We're going to be preempted all the time. And we've seen what that does to the ratings at this point. AEW can't afford to be moved from Friday to Saturday to all of these different dates for the NBA and the NHL because they're far more lucrative to Warner Media than AEW is. So being moved to TBS, obviously, frankly, there's more history on wrestling on TBS than there is on TNT, but also it removes this constant preemption of you're going to have to be moved for TNT, for the NBA rather, you're going to have to be moved for the NHL. It's good business. It's good business. And you won't have to have situations like this. As far as the match, I'm very excited for Kenny Omega versus Jungle Boy. Do I think we're going to see a new AEW World Champion? No. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a Christian Cage heel turn involved in this, and that involves taking out Jungle Boy, considering that Jungle Boy won the Battle Royal, and Christian basically told him, make the most of this opportunity, and it doesn't look like Jungle Boy is. That certainly is interesting. Now, speaking of an AEW talent, we have a new NWA World's Women's Champion. You would think, what does that have to do with AEW? But of course, it's because the former champion was an AEW talent. Camille is your new NWA Women's Champion. She defeated former champion and All Elite Wrestling star Serena Deeb in the penultimate match at NWA When Our Shadows Fall after landing a spear. This is Camille's first reign with the championship. The former champion Serena Deeb won the championship this past October when she defeated Thunder Rosa at UWN's Primetime Live. Both Rosa and Deeb made numerous appearances for AEW when they held the championship on both weekly Dynamites and pay-per-views. Deeb has defended the title as recently as last Sunday at the Double or Nothing pay-per-view, and she defeated Rio by submission. It remains to be seen if there are plans for Camille to compete on AEW wrestling programming right now, or if she's just going to stay with the NWA. I would tend to believe that she's probably just going to stick with NWA programming at this point. If she shows up in AEW, that would be fascinating, but I think at this point, they're probably just going to go in the different directions, and I think that there's still going to be a relationship between the NWA and AEW, but I think we're probably looking at a situation where Serena Deeb is just on AEW now. Thunder Rosa will continue to do both until her contract expires with NWA, then I think she's going to sign with AEW. I think it's that simple. As far as the match, I'll be totally transparent. Didn't see it, seen some highlights of it. I've heard some not spectacular things about the NWA pay-per-view, frankly, last night. Certainly production issues, and it doesn't feel like the NWA that was so popular on YouTube for NWA Power. It feels different. Now, and I don't know if that's the departure of Dave Lagana. I don't know if that's the departure of Dave Marquez. I don't know. There's lots of different elements there. But it does feel that it's not the same NWA at this point, which is disappointing for me because I was a fan of the NWA Power series. But look, I hope when it comes to Serena Deeb, I hope it opens up a possibility that Serena Deeb faces Britt Baker for the AEW World Championship, because if that's the case, I'm all in. I'm all in on that one because Serena Deeb is arguably one of, if not the best female wrestler on that roster today. She's just that good. So I'm excited to see if that's the case. But look, guys, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on all of the AEW news stories we've spoken about today? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about AEW, Impact Wrestling, WWE, New Japan Pro Wrestling, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved in the community. Drop a comment below. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button too. Really does help us out here on YouTube. Go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right corner of the screen right now. Or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or have you come across this video today. And I'll speak to you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.